Hi friends, welcome to Harmony Hills Home and Garden. I'm Jenny, we're gardening in Baltimore, Maryland, Zone 7. Today's project is to divide up all of this liriope that I have here and spread it out throughout the garden. We're talking about dividing perennials in the fall for expanding your collection of plants. So come with me and let's see how to do it. There are a lot of herbaceous perennials that you can divide and make more plants as a way to fill out your garden. The one I'm going to be working with today is this variegated liriope. It's a really easy one to divide and spread around and multiply in your garden. But you can do this with all sorts of herbaceous perennials, hostas, phlox, daisies, pretty much anything that's herbaceous, meaning that it doesn't form a woody stem or a base. And if it's not a single stem, then you can do this with it. The best time to divide your perennials is either in the fall as you head into the dormant winter months, or in the early spring before the plants really have flushed out and put on their summer growth. So what I have chosen to do this time is they have already flowered, the flowers are spent, and so I'm going to dig them up and divide them by their roots and spread them out in the garden. And then in the spring, when they start to put out their new shoots of leaves, I'll trim these leaves down to the ground in the early spring. And then the new leaves will come up and out and they will look gorgeous. Both sides of the sidewalk got 5 quart-size plants about 4 years ago. And so each of those quart-sized plants has grown up into a really nice sized clump. This is one clump right here. That's about 4 years growth off of a quart-sized pot. So each of these plants will be able to be divided into at least 2, sometimes 3, maybe even more. You can take them down even to individual shoots and spread those individual shoots out. We have done that before back when we had no money. We bought 1 gallon of liriope and we divided it up into more than 30 individual shoots and spread those out. And then a couple years later, we had a great looking border of liriope around our flower beds. I was in a different house. I don't think I'm going to go to that extreme. I don't need that much liriope today, but I am going to see how many nice sized clumps I can get out of these 10 plants. The tools for this project are pretty simple. I'm using my garden spade. You could also use a garden fork if you prefer. I'm using a hori to help divide the roots out. You could also cut the roots apart with your spade, and oftentimes you can just separate them with your fingers. I'm going to try that first. And then I have my garden gloves. And that's about it. The first step to dividing a perennial is to dig around the root ball and try to preserve as many roots as you can. So I'm going to come out about at the drip line and dig down all the way around. And once I have done the whole perimeter, then I try to get my shovel underneath the bottom. There we go. And that is a big clump of liriope. Now the second step is to shake off as many of the clods of dirt as you can, get those roots exposed. I'm going to actually get my hose out and wet this down a little bit, see if I can get some of that soil away from the roots that's down in there, right near the crown of the plant, because I don't want to damage these roots any more than I have to as I separate this into smaller clumps. So let me see if I can get it wet and see if that'll help. I'm going to go get a bucket and fill it with water and work it with it that way. Now this is a totally optional step, because what I could do right now if I wanted to, I could just take my knife or my shovel and just cut right through that root ball. And I might end up doing that, but I'm just kind of curious to see how much of this soil I can get off and maybe be able to separate a few of these sprigs from by hand. Also, I just like playing in the water. You can see what a mass of roots these have. Liriope is a really, really tough plant. It can withstand drought for sure. And actually, I have, in fact, this past spring, I dug up some liriope in the backyard and I left it unattended, not planted, bare root laying on the ground for a month. And I put it in the ground and it still grew. It was crazy. So I'm gonna see if I can pull this section off. This section right here, let's see. There we go. So that's a sprig. Actually, this is probably, I could probably divide that down even further, but so this will be like one very small section of this plant that I could plant. The benefit to separating your plants by the roots this way is that you're minimizing damage to the roots and maximizing how quickly they'll be able to reestablish. The problem is that it's very difficult, and honestly, I'm not sure I'm strong enough to do it all this way. So I might have to get my knife out. It's also pretty messy this way. There we go. Can you see, this is where it broke off from its siblings over here, and the rhizome continues underground horizontally, and then these feeder roots come off of the rhizome. So there's another small section. I think that's about all I'm gonna do with this method. I'm just gonna get my knife out and cut this apart into probably 3 more sections. I don't really need that many of these plants. I just wanted to show how you could separate them that way. So for the rest of these, I'm just gonna cut them apart with my knife. This knife is called a hori hori. It's built for gardening, but you could also use an old steak knife or an old bread knife. You could use a pruning saw, any number of things you could do this job with. So I think I'm gonna cut this into 2 pieces. I'm gonna see if there's a natural break, but I don't really think there is. We'll just go with that. There we go. Two huge sections. This is a good sized plant on its own. I could divide this again, but I don't need that many, so I think I'm gonna leave them this size. Okay, and so then you just toss away anything that broke off. But then you just plant this into soil, and now you've got 2 plants for the price of 1. Now another way to do it, if you don't have a hori hori, you can just put your spade right in here. This might take a little bit of work, but just put your spade in there and slice this root ball in half that way too, but this isn't my preferred method. I find this way harder because I'm short, and so my leverage is off. But if you're taller than me, or if you're working with a plant that doesn't have such a hard, dense root ball, the spade method can work. There we go. The liriope that I have on the north side of the sidewalk, those plants aren't as big as these that I just divided. So I don't think I'm actually going to end up with 10 from that side that are the same as the 10 from this side. So I think what I have to do is actually dig up those other 5 and split them, and then compare sizes and just divide the whole pile of them between the 2 sides of the border, rather than doing what I thought I could do, which is do them one side of the sidewalk at a time. So okay, I was able to dig them all up. I got 5 out. I divided all 5. And I do have 10 divisions over there. Some of these divisions are way smaller than the ones that I got from this side. However, I think after 1 or 2 growing seasons, no one is going to know. I might take one of the biggest ones from over there and put it over here, maybe just swap a couple of them. But I'm not going to worry about like piling them all together and worrying about dividing them into equal sizes, blah, blah, blah. So let me get some of these placed where I think they might go into the ground. So now it's a matter of getting these put into the ground. Liriope is a really tough plant. I don't have to baby these, so I'm going to put some biotone in with them, but I'm not going to worry about compost in the planting hole and things like that. I always top dress the flower beds in the spring with a good thick layer of compost and then mulch, so they'll be getting nutrients that way as well. So I'm just going to go around and plop these into the ground and see what they look like after it's all done. Well, friends, we've lost light. It is the end of the day. I do have all of those liriope replanted, spread out, kind of sprinkled throughout the front foundation flower bed. So I'm really happy with this project, but I have some more divisions to do I wanted to tell you about. So I'm going to come back at you tomorrow and finish up this video. Have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, hello friends. It's actually 2 days later. We had a cold front move through yesterday with rain and cool air. And so now we're properly in fall season right now. The weather is cool. We've got a breeze. It's a beautiful day. And I'm dressed for the weather today. Blink and things change. So I wanted to show you another thing about dividing perennials. You can divide perennials that you already have in your garden, or you can also divide perennials that you just purchased. Here's an example. I bought these 2 black truffle lobelia plants, cardinal flowers, at the garden center very recently. And I'm going to actually divide these out and make them into a bigger clump from the get-go. Let me show you how I'm going to do that. So sometimes you buy perennials that are root bound, or sometimes you buy perennials that you just want to spread further because they're nice healthy specimens. So these are cardinal flower lobelia, black truffle variety, and the good thing about these is that they're pretty easy to separate. So you can kind of just take them out of the can and knock the soil off of them. That. And you see, I mean, this was in a really big can, but the roots are not exactly all that thick in there. And so now what you can do is you can look for the separate little clusters. There's 1, 2, 3 clusters of plants in here. And actually, while I was at the nursery, I picked out the pots that I could find that had 3 clusters in them. I looked for some with 4. I didn't see any. So, but you can see that there's like the center of where the leaves are coming out. There's 3 centers on this plant. There's 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. And so I know that there are 3 little clusters of plant in here. And so I knew that I'd be able to spread this out into 3 plants. And so I've just shaken off the roots. And then you can see here's 1 and here's 1. I'm just going to separate that. See that? So there's 1. And then you can see where the other 2 are, and you just separate those. gently pull them apart. There you go. And it looks like actually I can probably separate this into two. Well, because I think it does have two centers right here, but I think I'm not seeing the easy separation down on this side of it, so I'm going to just leave these two together. Out of this 1 3-quart pot, I got 3 plants. And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to plant these into the ground about this far apart, kind of like this. And so then they'll grow, each of these clumps will grow into a larger clump like they originated. And next season in the spring, I'll have a very nice size clump of lobelia rather than just this one little small rosette. So I'm going to do this to that pot as well and get these into the ground. And by the way, this time of year is great for planting because these roots are going to fill out and they'll start growing. And I anticipate that this cluster that has the beginnings of 2 separate clusters, probably by this time next year, it'll have at least 2 that are big, but probably it'll have 3 or 4 or even 5 little flower clusters in this one plant. So this one has 2 different ones as well. These all do. All 3 of these have 2 little clusters of flowers. So I could try to pull those apart as well. Let me just try one and see how easy or hard it is. And you can kind of see the separation right here. Yeah, there we go. And it looks like I could continue pulling this down. I don't know if you can see, this is a separate cluster, this is a separate cluster, this is a separate cluster, etc. You could keep going, but I'm going to leave them like this. So that's another way to divide perennials. Now, some perennials are easy to pull apart like this. Others, you might have to slice the roots like we did with the liriope. Hostas, if you get them young, you can pull them apart. If you get them old, you might have to slice them. It just depends on what the plant is. Try just pulling, but if that doesn't work, just be gentle with your knife. Another way to pretty simply divide perennials is just to dig them in place. I have this stand of black-eyed Susan. This is Rudbeckia Gold Serm right here. And my plan is just to dig out some of the plants and move them to another location. There's one. There's 2. And you can just kind of use your shovel as a knife to delineate where you want to stop digging. I think I want about that much. All right, so that was a really easy way to divide up this perennial. If something spreads by runners, that is a super effective way to do it. Okay, and just one more quick demonstration about the cut in place method. This is a clump of mini pearl phlox, tall garden phlox. It actually only grows to be about this tall, and it is one of the earliest things to bloom in my garden in the spring. And I'm going to take just a chunk of this clump off. I'm just going to put my shovel in here and kind of find a natural dividing point like that. Then I'm just going to make a cut. And so now I still have a nice healthy stand of phlox right here, and this will continue to grow and spread in and fill in over time. But I also have a real quick and easy section of phlox that I can put somewhere else. And in fact, I'll probably cut this in 2 and make 2 different clumps somewhere else in my garden. Thanks so much for joining me today as we talked about dividing perennials. I hope you learned something. If you have tips or tricks or suggestions about how you divide your perennials in your garden, please put them down in the comment section below. We love to learn from each other on this channel and share ideas. I hope you have a wonderful day in your garden, friends, and I will see you in another video really soon. Bye!